Hello and welcome to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast, a resilience podcast where we talk about all the challenging things that we're working to overcome, like anxiety, health, and relationship issues. My name is Sarah. So welcome to another episode of the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast. I'm so happy to connect with you this week. We are into the thick of winter here in Canada, late January, early February, and it's definitely cold and it's definitely snowy. We're finding we're getting a lot of just snow on snow on snow, and it's honestly starting to get me a little down. We ended up taking a family trip to Mexico a week or so ago, and that was such a nice break. It went really well. I had been nervous to do the traveling. I haven't really been on a plane since COVID. Haven't went anywhere of, that magnitude, but it all went really well. It was so great to be near a beach, to get in the water, to see the sun again. It just really was good for the mood. And really good family time. I was a little nervous about the gluten and dairy-free eating, but we had some good luck. They had gluten-free pancakes at the buffet and some other things that we could taste and try. So it all worked out and felt really good. Definitely didn't get sick, anything like that. So I hope that you're finding some respite from the cold in whatever way you can, be it exercise. I know sometimes it can be fun to hit like a local pool in the winter because it just makes you feel in a bit of a different place, or maybe you like winter outdoor activities, anything that kind of helps you to get through. This week on the podcast, we're going to dig into relationships again. So honestly, this episode could have totally went in our marriage and partnership series that we did back in the fall, but it's not. It's coming to you in the new year, and I think it's going to be a really interesting one. So we're going to talk about breakups. We, in the marriage and partnership series, we talked a lot about challenges in relationship and communication and intimacy, but this is more on the other side, the straight up breakup. So I know breakups can be really hard, and I don't think that anyone is ever excited about going through the emotional aspects of a breakup. But today's guest, Tal Yardeni, is a breakup recovery coach, and she's the founder of the program, the Breakup to Badass Formula, and she's vowing to change that. Tal went from being a New York City singer and actress to a breakup recovery coach during the pandemic based on her own personal breakup and her deepened spiritual practice. She wants to see women feeling happy, confident, and able to rock their lives post-breakup. Let's hear her thoughts about breakups and how to go from breakup to badass. Enjoy this episode with Tal Yardeni, Breakup Recovery Coach. So welcome, Tal, to the podcast. I'm happy to connect with you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So why don't we start with you providing a little bit about your background and how you moved from being a New York City singer and actress to a breakup recovery coach?
Sure. Yes, I spent 13 years in the city as a singer and actress, and then the pandemic happened and the industry shut down. So during that time, I was able to reflect like many of us did. And, I was going through my own breakup. And so I was, using the tools that I now use today to help other women. But at the time, I was able to really tend to myself. And so I was reaping the benefits because I saw that I was just getting so much better and really taking care of me and learning how to prioritize me. And so when, I was starting to think, okay, well, what else could I do professionally? This was never a thought in my mind before while I was in New York, like, let's become a breakup recovery coach.
Yeah.
But during this time, my friends basically were like, well, Tal, you're like the go-to. People always are, they always come to you when they are going through something. And so there was something to that. So I sat with that for a little bit. And then I was like, I wonder, life coaching, relationship coach. And that spoke to me. So I decided to get certified. And within like a week of being in life coaching school, I was like, this feels right. Because before I was like, yeah, why not? Let's see. Let's just see, right? Like I was curious. It wasn't like this has to happen. I was just like, I think this is the direction and I'm open to it. And within a week, I was like, yeah, this feels really right. And then, as I was thinking who I wanted to work with, I was like, well, I think I want to work with, I want to work with women who are going through what I've been through because I've been there. And so I understand it and I know how to get them to the other side. And I know it's necessary. So that's kind of the short of the long.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating though. And I think, a lot of things obviously came together kind of at the exact same time and to put you in the position that you were interested in this and that it sort of worked into that direction. So why don't we get into a little bit about what breakup recovery looks like? And one of the things that I know comes up a lot is self-love. And so why don't you tell us in terms of self-love as we know it, why, I know you think it's kind of BS and why self-love is really crucial though in a different way in terms of breakup.
Yeah. So, when I see it, there's like a common denominator when I'm working with women, and it has to do with self-worth, which is really self-love. So when we talk about, self-confidence, self-worth, self-love, it's all under the same umbrella. And it's the one thing that's gone out the window. And so it's the thing that I hear a lot is, I've lost myself. I don't know who I am. And so, the way that self-love is perceived is, I go and get a massage, or I go and get a mani-pedi, or I go and get my hair done, which is all lovely. That's part of self-care. Sure. But it's superficial, right? It doesn't really go deep. And so self-love is really like learning how to have your own back, right? And never abandoning yourself in order to be with another, never abandoning yourself in order to please another. And so when you learn that, then you're going to be operating from a completely different place in your life. And so why is it crucial? It's because exactly what I said is that women tend to feel lost, and their self-worth and their self-confidence, if you had to rate it, is probably at a 1 or a 2 because they're taking the breakup as meaning they're not good enough. And so when we learn that we are good enough, regardless of whether, someone else can show up for us or not, it's very powerful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So is that part of the reason that people feel that sort of midlife, I've lost myself? Is it the like bending and like doing things for other people and that sort of mentality that gets you there?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, growing up, did anyone ever teach you need to put yourself first?
Yeah.
We're taught, right? We're taught that, we need to take care of others. We need to be there for others. We need to please others. We want to make sure, it's the people pleasing a little bit, right? Which can go along with codependency, which is like a whole other topic. But yeah, I definitely, I think we're not taught this. So it feels very foreign to learn how to do this kind of work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's always kind of prized, especially in girls, like sort of that selfless attitude is like,
Yes.
oh, that's how, we should be selfless and helping others. And yeah, you're right. And then you get to a point though where you maybe don't know what self is even
Right.
anymore.
Exactly. And so I'm not teaching women to be, don't give a crap about anybody else. No. But what is it costing you and at the expense of what? Right.
And where is the time for yourself? And
right.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So why don't we dig a little bit more into self-worth? I know one of the things you've said is that, romantic comedies have kind of influenced our thinking about that. So maybe you can expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah. So listen, I love a good rom-com, right? But I mean, growing up, what it's showing young women, and then it kind of gets ingrained in your brain, is that even when the woman is, she's got a great career, she's got her life going, everything's going great for her, the most important thing is the relationship. And so the way that, it's depicted, I mean, just to really make a case in point here, Jerry Maguire, right? One of the most famous lines Tom Cruise's character says to Renee Zellweger's character is, "You complete me."
Right. Mm-hmm.
So think about that for a second. Telling someone else you complete me. So I am not complete without you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, what kind of relationship is that going to be? How much
Yeah.
pressure is that going to be on someone else that they complete you? Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of
And
the,
then what happens if it's not no longer existing, right?
oh my gosh. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Like, then where do you go from here? You
Mm-hmm.
know? And so that's kind of the message that we're sending to women, is that we are not complete without a partner. And so I want to preface by saying that I think that partnerships are beautiful. And I think that there's a fantastic growth that takes place there. But what place are you coming from, right? Like, when you know that you are complete on your own, and then you're joining in with someone else who also knows that they're complete, then it's a different kind of journey together. Whereas opposed to, I am seeking from you because I am lacking.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's kind of where rom-coms are. And so they normalize the Prince Charming is going to come and save you. Right. We see that in Disney movies all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
just not a healthy mindset. And so that's what's been modeled to us. If you look at that in music, if you look at that in major movies, the plot lines, how it goes, and we normalize it. And so then people think, oh my gosh, like, if someone's not making a grand gesture for me, if I
Mm-hmm.
can't change that person, because in movies, right, it's usually like the guy's a little bit of a bad boy, or he's not great in relationships, but he has like a coming of Jesus moment, and he decides that he's going to change for this woman. And so these are the expectations that we are now putting upon people in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how do we go about breaking that cycle then of, putting our self-worth into our relationships?
Yeah, is that you start to really, the women that I'm working with, right, inside of my program, the Breakup to Badass formula. So we look at this and we take an honest inventory of what was I seeking? Or what was why did I put up with certain behaviors? What was it there that I thought that was all I deserved for myself, right? And when you start to get really honest with yourself, then that's the place when you can start healing, and you start to tend to yourself, and you start to prioritize yourself, and you start to, how do you start your day, right? Like in my program, I'm teaching you how to start your day with a morning routine. And why is that so important? Because that is when we are the most open, right? When we wake up in the morning, your mind is the most fresh to receive any new information. And so when you take care of yourself first, you have a much better chance of the day going in your favor, as opposed to like rushing to the phone, rushing to your kids, rushing to, you know what I mean? We rush for everything else, but we don't take the time for ourselves. So I'm really teaching you how to take the time for yourself, and then to have a ton of compassion, because we are so hard on ourselves, right? Like that inner critic voice. Oh man. Like
Mm-hmm.
if we said those things to someone else, what we say to ourselves and what we say about ourselves, people would have their jaws would be on the floor, right? Because we don't speak that way to other people, but to ourselves, we are not kind. And so I'm really teaching you how to be kind to yourself.
Okay, so that's kind of the big step, is that kindness, and then sort of healing our relationship with ourselves.
Absolutely. Because then when you're, by the time you're done with me in 3 months, you're in such a different position, because you now know how to speak up for yourself, right? You
Mm-hmm.
no longer, before, where you might have been silent about things that are super important to you, you have no problem now speaking up, because you know how important that is, because I'm not abandoning myself anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so say, somebody's listening that's just recently had a breakup and they're
Mhm.
kind of in a spot where they're not feeling great.
Mhm.
How can they really make the breakup serve them? Like, how can it, maybe be the best thing that's ever happened to them?
Yeah, so you really have an opportunity here, and I know that it's super painful, because when you're in it,
Mhm.
listening to me say this, you're probably like, shut the hell up. I'm in so much pain right now. And I get it, because I've been there. But I can use an example. A former client of mine, we recently just had like a one-on-one coaching session. And she said to me, she said, when I first came to you, I was in survival and surviving. She's like, is the word I would use. And now I'm thriving. And she said, I really can look at this now as a blessing, because it brought me to me.
Mm-hmm.
It brought me to, she's like, if I had not gone through this breakup, I would still be operating from the same place. I would still be operating from a place of taking care of everybody else, not knowing how to take care of me, staying in a relationship that doesn't feel fulfilling to me, being treated in a way where where I don't deserve this. But at the time I felt like this was the best I was going to do. So I put up with it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that place where you're like, I have an opportunity now to do things differently because I don't want to keep repeating this in my life because we get one life. Right. So we better take care of us and learn how to live in a way that, where we are happy, where we do wake up feeling like there's purpose, right? As opposed to Groundhog's Day where it just feels really lackluster. So did I answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're saying because the breakup sort of provides like an instance to work on that opportunity. I think that's kind of what I'm hearing, that it's sort of giving you that moment of, hey, you need to do something different.
Yes. It's like, what can I learn from this? And especially if you've been in relationships where this is a pattern, you find that it kind of always ends this way. You know what I mean? Or you always keep attracting the same kind of partner, then we've got to look at ourselves. And so I always say this, it's like, we look at ourselves not to shame ourselves, but we have to take responsibility for our side of the street. I used to go listen to Marianne Williamson talk, and she always used to say, it may have been 99% them, but what is your 1%? And so I always say to my clients, we have to look at our 1% because that now is an opportunity for us to go deep so that you can come out of this no longer repeating the same things, knowing that, those types of relationships are just not sexy to you anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting that same pattern over and over again isn't what you want.
Right.
And so what if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going through a hard time, say, in relationship, and maybe we're working through it and, we're not breaking up or moving on, but I still want those things of, looking out for myself, taking this time for self-care, setting myself up to really not constantly be bending to others and doing firm boundaries. Can a lot of what you're teaching also apply to somebody in relationship or not even in a relationship?
Absolutely. Yes to both. I had a client who came to me when she was in a separation and she didn't know if she wanted to leave her wife or not. She wasn't sure. By the end of it, she realized after doing all of this work and seeing it for what it was, she realized she didn't want to stay in that relationship anymore. But I was, my program is not about the other person. It's not about the ex. It's not about your partner. It's about you. And so this work, doing this kind of work is beneficial to women who are currently in relationship, women who are not in a relationship that want to get into a relationship, because you're just so much better equipped to deal with the hard times, to deal with hard conversations, to deal with conflict, because, conflicts, it's not easy to speak up, right? It's not easy to advocate for yourself. And so there's a way to do it, without shunning the other person out, but also, standing your ground on things that are really important to you.
And yeah, I mean, maybe still there's an impetus for change that's coming, but it could be of a different magnitude than a breakup, for instance. But yeah, that seems great. So the other thing I wondered is, how does a spiritual practice kind of link in with breakup recovery?
Yeah, so we tend to feel really alone. And I know for me, I felt so alone when I was going through my breakup.
Yeah.
And so I really had to tap in to, that higher power, whatever that is, however you call it, whether that's God, creator, universe, whatever that is for you. There is a higher power, that is a universal energy that is really running the show here. And so we think we're running the show, which is funny, but there is a universal energy that is running the show, right? And when you tap into that energy and you realize, when we just look at how incredible our body is, right? We are able to breathe. We don't have to think about how to breathe. We just do it. You know what I mean? Our body is running for us. And so when we think about, wow, there is an energy that does that for me that I don't have to do, holy moly. The fact that I think I'm the one who has to be in control and has to figure it all out. And so when you deepen your spiritual practice, or when you lean into spiritual practice, there's an element of surrender. And so that is the part of us. It doesn't mean that we become complacent in our lives, but it means that we can rely on guidance to help us move forward. And in any moment, that guidance is available to us. And so I really teach that inside of my program, because it really helps you to know that, like, you don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to know, where you're going to be in every moment of time. Like, there is a guidance system that is always available to you at any moment, and all you have to do is call on it.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really interesting that, just sort of, I can see that loneliness piece for sure, especially with your story. I mean, being in the pandemic, that was a tough time
Mm-hmm.
to begin with, and then kind of looking for something more to link into.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I wondered, like, we've talked a little bit about tools, but are there any other tools that you kind of want to expand on for us, or any other key pieces of advice or tips that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah. I mean, I'll share. I'll share two things. For anyone that's either fresh out of a breakup or they're really having a hard time breaking free. I always say no contact. And so no contact is really important. Obviously, if you have kids, there are other ways around it where the conversation really just has to do with co-parenting and nothing else. But for, those of us who don't have that, no contact is really important, and it's going to feel really hard to do. But it's really critical, because as long as you have this person in your life, it's going to be really hard for you to move forward. And because you don't have access to them in the same way, you're going to be wondering, why am I not hearing from them? What are they up to? Why are they not texting me? Why are they not calling me? This must mean that they don't care about me. It just, we start to run that narrative in our minds. And so it's really important. This is the time, again, if we've taken anything from this conversation, is to really put this focus on you. And so when you commit to this no contact and you say, look, for this time, I need to move forward. And so I really would like for you to respect this, and, and we will not be communicating during this time. This is really, again, showing up for yourself, right? This is doing something that's hard, but necessary, because you know that 3, 6, 7, 8, 1 year, 9 months from now, a year from now, you don't want to be in the same position, right? So that's one. And with no contact, it's not just them texting. It's also not looking at their social media. Maybe you're unfollowing each other or muting each other for a time, because there are other things where it's like, oh, well, I'm not in communication, but I'm still looking at their social media or their stories. And that, again, that keeps you stuck, because they're literally on the brain now. Right.
Yeah. Like, they're occupying a piece of your mind at this point. Yeah.
Right. And then we're starting to make all sorts of stories and conclusions about what those pictures are like. Who are they with? What are they doing? Oh, they look like they're having the time of their lives. Because social media really, it really shows us what people are doing in their lives. Like, obviously we don't know. Right. Like, we see a picture of someone having the time of their lives. We don't know what's underneath that. But it's just, my point is, it's not going to help. Two is, I hear a lot about, suddenly I always say this, like, we have like the rose colored glasses on when the breakup happens. Suddenly the ex, and I'm not here to villainize, in some instances it's a beautiful relationship. It's just not a match. Right. But in some instances the ex was not so great. And suddenly all of that stuff, like, if it was you were mistreated, or you were cheated on, or you weren't prioritized, whatever it was, suddenly all of those things that, brought you to the demise of the relationship, suddenly that goes out the window, and they become the best thing ever.
Right.
And it's all we can see. All we can see are the good times. All we can see are the times that they treated you well. And so this is when I go, okay, love, I get it, because obviously you wouldn't have stuck around if there weren't good times, but you really got to get honest. And so I ask you to actually write it down, and write all the reasons why you are no longer together, why this relationship isn't for you, and to keep it handy in a place where you will be able to reference back to it, because the brain is going to go to this place of like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to have a love like this again. They were the best thing for me. I'll never get over this. No one will ever treat me as well as they did. And then I say, okay, let's take out that list. Let's look at it and tell me what is the truth in that. And they go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's painful to go, yeah, they didn't treat me well and they did X, Y, and Z, but At the same time, it's crucial because it's going to accelerate your healing.
Mm-hmm. That seems like it would be really helpful too. Like we get moments that sort of trigger a past relationship, like even with the holidays coming, it's like maybe
Mhm.
you're like, oh, but remember when we had this Christmas
Right.
together? And like, of course that was a good memory, but you're right. Like keeping those pieces of why that's not good for you kind of close would maybe be helpful in some of those cases too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Holidays are a really tough time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, commercially, what we're being sold, right? We're being sold families and love and togetherness and all of that. And then suddenly you're in this breakup and you're like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any of that. So that is a time when, is to really be alert and to really lean into these tools and lean into what you need for yourself, because that's a time when, it's very easy to slide back and let people back into your life who really don't deserve a spot there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Good advice for sure.
Thank
So
you.
that's great. I mean, I think a lot of this makes so much sense, and you've obviously broken it down into a way that, you can walk clients through and really show them how to kind of find their best selves. And I think that's great.
Thank you. I love what
So,
I do.
why don't you let listeners know how they can find you if they're thinking of working with you, or if there's any other ways to connect online or through social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at the Tal Yardeni. And I have a Facebook group, Breakup Recovery Support Group for Badass Women. That's really great because I go in there live weekly and I'm answering your questions. So, a lot of women come in there, they have a lot of questions about what they're going through. I give you tips on how to move forward. So that's really a really wonderful place. And also, you're going to want some support and community during that time. So find me in
Mhm.
either of those places.
All right, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I think this will give people a totally different perspective on breakup, how to see it like it's maybe going to be for them instead of like, why? Why did this happen?
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Sarah. It's been great.
Thank you so much to Tal Yardeni for being part of the podcast this week. I really enjoyed her tips about looking at breakups in a totally different way. I loved her thinking around rom-coms and how those can be really challenging. And, I can definitely remember a lot of that messaging, especially as a teen when you're very impressionable, even young adult, and you think, oh, this is how things should be. And no, it's definitely great for her to be pointing out some of the challenges with that kind of thinking. I loved her focus on self-love and, really, really caring for yourself, and her tips about how to actually get through the breakup itself, like no contact and no social media, and looking at things in a way where you're writing down reasons why you're no longer together to remind yourself of, the importance of the breakup really in your life, and hopefully that leads you on to feeling great instead of, that, well, the way you would in a rom-com where you're feeling kind of down in the dumps and all of those kinds of stereotypes around being in a situation where you're going through a breakup. So thanks so much to Tal for being on the podcast. If you do want to connect with her, she mentioned her Instagram at Tal Yardeni and her Facebook, the Breakup Recovery Support Group for Badass Women. And I hope that you've enjoyed this and it's got you thinking a little bit about things. Definitely, I know we're leading into Valentine's Day soon. And so, that is a time where relationships are on the mind for people. And if you're going through a breakup, here's a way that you can feel good and connect with Tal if you're looking to get some more personalized coaching around breakup. I hope everybody, like I said at the top of the episode, is dealing with the winter in a positive way, finding whatever you need in order to get through this cold and very snow-filled winter that we're having, definitely here in Ontario, Canada. I hope you all have a great week, and I look forward to connecting with you next week. Thank you for listening to the Learning to Slay the Beast podcast. Please keep in mind, this podcast is not intended to be medical or professional advice. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can follow me on social media, Instagram and TikTok at Sarah Lady Gluten, or Facebook, Sarah_gluten-free lady. You can also visit my website, which includes author information, speaking information, and more info on the podcast at www.se-german.com. If you like the podcast, please feel free to review the podcast on your favorite platform and also subscribe, because it means that it will show up for you every week on your favorite podcast platform. Also, we've just started to have the ability to support the podcast. You can find this link in my Instagram bio or visit Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/learning to slay the beasts. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.